A big summer for the U.S. national team starts with a back-to-back sour notes. First Jamaica, now Venezuela. 3-0 loss to La Vino Tinto for the U.S. national team under Greg Berhalter. That's now 2 straight L's for the Nats, the first 2 for Greg. AT&T MLS Studios is where we're going to break it all down. And this was a rough one. I'm here with Kalen Carr, Bobby Warshaw, and Matt Doyle, and here are the highlights. Precious few chances for the U.S. Matt. Weston McKinney with a header there, and then in the first half, all Venezuela.
Yeah, all Venezuela, and it started to look eerily reminiscent of that game against Jamaica the other day. Now, this goal was offside, but it doesn't obviate the problem with the U.S., which is just bad decision-making, slow rotations through midfield. You can't play the ball there, but you have to make yourself available at the very least if you're in central midfield. And then this, like, you pass that runner off. If you're Aaron Long or Matt Miazga, you pass that man off to Will Trapp. Zero communication there. It feels like this is a team that's still just in a complete learning phase, and it's driving me nuts.
Everything you said was right, Matt, and here's the complicated part, because there were some okay things that happened, but the 3 goals were so bad that it masked everything else. And anyone that's saying that it was a poor performance is absolutely right, because the 3 goals were 3 goals you could give up in any single game, or they have been giving up, and if you do give them up, you will lose, and nothing else matters.
You watch the highlights, and they look scrambling from the beginning of the match. Just no communication between the center back pairings. Those two did not work well together. I'd be surprised to see them get another run out, at least as a partnership. But all over the pitch, there was just a lack of understanding. Guys even running into each other on the attacking end. You saw Christian and Jordan smashing into each other late in the match. So it just looked completely disjointed throughout. One of the worst performances, and at the wrong time, trending the wrong direction for the U.S.
The final friendly for the U.S. ahead of the Gold Cup, which starts on Tuesday, June 18th against Guyana. This was a game in which Salman Rondon had his way with those center backs. Jefferson Marino from RSL gets that goal. The movement from Venezuela honestly wasn't that complicated, and that's part of what's frustrating right now. The concerns, the biggest at least, are what?
Midfield, specifically getting the ball, getting pressure to the ball in central midfield. As you said, Rondon had his way with that back line, and Savarino was able to slice through us like a hot knife through butter. But that's frontline stuff, and that happens deeper upfield, where it's just not clear to the guys, it seems, whose responsibility is what in terms of where do you step, where do you try to shepherd play to. Here is where we ambush a guy and try to force a turnover. And then any time that a turnover happens for the U.S. right now, it's a jailbreak. It's a jailbreak going in the other direction, and it just doesn't look like it doesn't look like they know what they're supposed to do. They don't look well drilled.
I'm not going to use the word crisis, but I want to at least introduce it to the conversation. Is there any element of that right now for Greg Berhalter and this team, given the fact that we're now past the friendly stage? It's competitive matches. It's the Gold Cup. There's an expectation that at the very least this team will be in the final.
I don't know if that's the expectation anymore. I really think that's a real question to ask right now is can this team be expected to make the final? I think the last 2 performances say no. The only thing that would go the other direction is just the lack of personnel. And that was the big issue for me. Missed 4 probably of our top 5 players with no Christian Pulisic. Jozy Altidore came on the second half, looked tremendous. You saw the way he changed the team. You didn't have Michael Bradley, who was another name that would be right up near the top of the team sheet for me. So I think you really were missing some of those big personalities at this point in our progression as a on the men's side of U.S. soccer. We're not in a position that we can be confident and even find good performances or even decent results without that core group of players.
Andrew, I'm actually going to go bigger than that with my thoughts at this moment, because there's a question to be had. And I'll start with this. I think Greg Berhalter is a very good coach. What he did with the Columbus Crew was very impressive. But is it right for the national team? Is it right for the international game? Because he is clearly conducting a process. If you look at this team, they have ideas. They have things that they are trying to do, but they aren't executing them. There is a process taking place. The question is, can you do a process with the national team? Do you have time to learn the details, to evaluate the details, and then actually train the details so you have the muscle memory for when it comes time to execute in a game? And that's everything. We can talk about anything else that's taking place, but if what he is doing is not right for the national team, for the international game, then he needs to reevaluate. Is he actually building towards something, or is it heading toward an iceberg?
Can I submit that you could actually do it, but he might be doing it backwards? Like, why not just get really good at playing a bog standard 4-3-3 first and foremost. You know, like put Tyler Adams or Michael Bradley in that number 6 role and let them plug things up right in front of the back line. Play a pretty standard back 4. You know, get one kind of battling two-way number 8 and a more purer 10. Put a couple of, do that first. To me, that's the first step in the process, is to be good at the basic things, not to do the super complex thing right off the top and then work backwards. This feels like Greg Berhalter is working backwards, Bobby.
It does. What I would say is they all work together, right? You can't say start at A and get to B. You have to be able to do all of them or else it fails. But regardless of what we're saying, if you want to do anything, can you do it when you have 2 days to train before your games, when the players are coming in and out because of form and injury? So I don't mind where he started, Matt, but I think if you're going to try and coach anything with the level of detail that he does, you have to really think hard on whether you have enough time to train and prepare before you get into these games.
What's the alternative then?
You play the way Bob Bradley and Bruce Arena did, which was simpler. You don't try and tell players to go to spots and weights. You don't try and build intricate movements in the attacking third. You don't try and press the way his teams press. You say compete, do the basics well, but I think what Matt was saying is you want to do complex basics. Is that what?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
But yeah, you just simplify absolutely everything you do to the way, quite frankly, almost every single national team around the world does it.
I respect that he has a philosophy. I think, even at halftime he said that, the pass out of the back from Zach Steffen, it was the wrong choice, didn't have the support maybe coming from the middle. He should actually read that and choose an option to his left, maybe to play square, a little bit of a safer pass for him there. But I think Greg has pretty consistently proven that he's willing to accept that if he loses a goal there. And I think that philosophy is a good thing for the U.S. going forward. The biggest issue is you just don't have the pieces right now to be able to see this actually work right now, because if you don't have your number 6, or if you don't have your number 8, or you don't have your star winger or number 10, depending on where you see Christian Pulisic, it's not going to look the same. And we started to see signs of that with Jozy Altidore when he came in, just what his presence brought for the people and the places around him. So I think there is a choice, the right choice to go for a philosophy. It's just not working right now.
I will say that if he was to go the Bob Bradley or Bruce Arena route, as you say, there would be people out there with pitchforks just the same right now as you have 2 bad results. The expectation was that Greg Berhalter would change some things for the U.S., that he would bring a different style of play, that they would have this attacking verve. Well, here are the results here. You're missing that opening win against Panama. That was 3-0. Now you see a trend here. 2 losses, a draw, 2 wins. What is the trend result-wise? How does it apply to the performances?
I mean, the results actually do speak to the performances here, the last 2 especially. And I'm going to hammer one point. It's about getting pressure to the ball in midfield. We just keep getting overrun. The guys don't seem to know how to work together. If you look at the amount of space and the amount of 50-50s that we lose in that space, I do think it comes down to person. I don't want to say comes down to. I do think that personnel is a huge issue with it. If it's Tyler Adams out there as the number 6, I don't think we're losing the vast majority of our 50-50s in central midfield. And if you're not losing hold of the game there, then you can start doing all this complex stuff that Bobby was diagramming on a cocktail napkin as we were watching the game.
Yeah, and that's part you have to acknowledge, too. We can say it was horrible, it wasn't good enough. But there's also an element, as Caleb pointed out, when you're missing your 4 best players, what can you reasonably expect, especially when you are, going back to Andrew's point, shooting the moon, when you're trying to raise the standard, when you're trying to play a better style. How many teams, whether they're a national team or not, could do it without their 4 best players? And you have to acknowledge that part, too.
So should we sit here and be confident that when Christian Pulisic, Michael Bradley, Tyler Adams, who's a defender, by the way, you talk about him as a 6, they list him as a defender. He's going to play right back, you have to believe. How much can they change this? Because based on the last 2 results, there has to be a big change.
I mean, hopefully a lot. Again, I'm of the belief that the problem with the U.S. we've seen the last 180 minutes is in the engine room, is just not winning the ball enough and being easy to play against right in the heart of the team. Tyler Adams is not that guy. He does not allow you to play against him. And I think if we start to see Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie, and then maybe it's a Dwayne Holmes, maybe it's a Christian Roldan, we don't have a real piano player to play as a 10. Maybe just put 3 piano movers out there, be miserable, and then maybe counterattack through the wings or just quick transitions. It can't be what we've seen the last 2 games. It just can't. It's the number 1 rule don't get into a land war in Asia. Don't go against the Sicilian when death is on the line, and don't lose central midfield in international soccer.
The obvious rules.
You've never seen Princess Bride.
No, you're exactly right. Greg Berhalter has an idea of how he wants to play, but how many times can it not go right? And how many times can you lose the midfield before you say, I understand why Will Trapp's on the field, but he's not getting it done.
And so the question is, how much of what Will Trapp in theory brings, or Michael Bradley in theory brings, how much of that do you lose if it's Tyler Adams as a six?
Well, as we evolve and we try and keep the ball and keep possession out of the back and play forward, I think that's a great part of this philosophy of Greg Berhalter. You can't lose some of the spirit that's made this U.S. team so good in the past. You look at the names that have played center midfielder, Michael Bradley, Kyle Beckerman, Jermaine Jones. These guys had real personality, guys that were stuck in the challenge, and we didn't see that fight even, that bite in the tackle until the 40th minute when we saw Weston McKennie get stuck in a little bit. That personality came out a little bit more in the second half, but at minimum, that's what you expect to see from a U.S. soccer fan base. That's what the fans are really craving right now, is to see, yes, the change of philosophy to a little bit more possession base, but can we also have some of that same bite that we've always had?
You got to win the ball to have possession. It's one of the things, to bring it back to what we were talking about in the pregame show, against Ecuador, against France. Like, if you watch the first 6 minutes of those games, we won the ball in midfield 3 or 4 times. Every time it was Paxton Pomykal. Every time, and it was just win and go. And we have to get back to that basic for the U.S. national team. And right now, nobody's doing the job for the U.S. that Pomykal did in the U20 World Cup.
Doesn't do Pulisic or Adams or Bradley any favors to come into a team in this form right now with a little bit of, as I said, sourness around the names. Now, Jozy Altidore is a guy who changed this game. He comes in the second half, all of a sudden it's more creative, there are more chances, more goal-scoring opportunities. The U.S. could not capitalize on any of them, but it is very clear that he is the number one option at center forward, and it's not close, at least in my mind. If he is healthy, he's on the field because he changes the game for the U.S.
Yeah, it was his hold-up play, gives you a reference point, but also his ability to drop off a little bit and create. I've always felt Altidore's passing ability was a little bit underrated, and this nice little touch from Roldan, who came alive. But you saw a couple moments of combination between Altidore and McKennie, which was a real bright spot for me in the second half for those two. But being able to kind of pop it in and then create some space on the wings, you know he's always going to be dangerous around the net. But he just changed the game even from the way the team was able to play through him often once he stepped onto the pitch. It looked completely different.
He's the best center forward on the team. He's the best playmaker on this roster right now as well. There are gaps in this roster. And the idea is hopefully Jozy stays healthy and Pulisic gets back and he's healthy, and Bradley and Adams, wherever they end up playing, they can paper over some of the gaps and they could give this foundation, because there is, with those 4 guys, there is foundational talent there. The structure has me worried.
It's not mutually exclusive to say the group of players they had on the field today probably can't do this system. They are not right for what Greg Berhalter wants to do, but you also need to wait and see what he can do with Tyler Adams and Jozy Altidore and Michael Bradley. So it's not wrong to say, what the heck was that today? That wasn't good enough. But also, I'm willing to give it another 3 weeks to see how he does with the full complement of players.
We've been talking so much about the negatives. Let's see some of the positives, at least some chance creation from the U.S. in the second half. As we do so, I want you guys to walk me through what cracks might these players paper over. How does it change when Christian Pulisic is in there? How does it change when Michael Bradley is in there and Tyler Adams is at right back? What is different for this team?
Just the level of quality is going to be higher. We're going to win the ball more in central midfield. We'll see how many times I can say that in this show. But these types of chances, if that's Christian Pulisic, you have to think one of these touches is a goal. Will Trapp has had 2 stinkers right in a row. Michael Bradley's had some bad games for the U.S. national team, but he's never been ineffectual like that. He can be out-athleted, but you at least feel his presence. I don't think we felt Will Trapp's presence in either of those games. That's all huge stuff. And then I liked what I saw from Tyler Boyd today. He looked pretty good. So if you have him out there and Pulisic out there as well, suddenly you could make the field pretty wide. You can make it really big. And if you do that, then your lack of a pure creator in central midfield, maybe that's less telling than it was in these 2 games. Because as good as Paul Arriola can be and as much effort as he puts into it, Venezuela wasn't respecting him. They were standing way off him and saying, we know he's not going to hurt us if he gets the ball in isolation.
Yeah, Andrew, to answer your direct question, what was better in the second half? It looked to me like they were just playing on instinct more. And specifically, it came from Jozy. Because you watch Jozy Altidore, one of really the only reasons Altidore is in this team is he knows his role within the Greg Berhalter system. Stay high, pin the center backs, hold your position. Jozy didn't do that. And that's not to say he did something wrong by defying what Berhalter's telling him, but by actually doing different tasks, by moving differently, it freed everyone else up. And for me, Berhalter has to notice that. When Jozy went against the strict game plan a little bit, everyone else was freer. And that's speaking to, what do you do differently? Well, Bob Bradley and Bruce Arena, they gave them general instruction. They gave them general ideas, but it wasn't, you go here, you do this and this when you get the ball, which I think works better in the club game, but can you do it in the international game? So when Jozy came on and kind of free flowed a little bit more, it allowed everyone else to do the same, and everyone else could play on instinct more.
Yeah, that's always been the difference between the two. And Jozy's a little bit more robotic. I think he's just about getting in the box and trying to finish the action. He's not a creator. He's not somebody that's going to come up with an idea or an unexpected moment. And to be fair to Greg Berhalter, when he's found success with Jozy, he hasn't asked him to do that. But the way the team is right now and the way it was set up to begin with because of the lack of personnel, that was what Jozy was asked to do. You saw the difference with Jozy coming in, the way he plays with his club team, with Pozuelo, his understanding of combination play, the way he was able to free players up like Areola, like Roldan making runs in behind. So that really changed in the second half. And then you add in Christian Pulisic to the picture. You think it's hopefully going to look a lot different.
You had Tyler Boyd as a possible positive here, and I thought he looked good, although I am concerned that a guy like him walks right into the starting 11, maybe not just for this game, but for the Gold Cup. That speaks to bigger issues. What are some other positives, however small, as we're kind of grasping for straws ahead of this Gold Cup opener? Because, look, Venezuela's a good team. Jamaica's a good team. This is not top-level talent on the world stage. This is the 30th ranked team in the world in Venezuela who finished last in Coma Bowl and World Cup qualifying on 12 points below Bolivia. These are not teams that you kind of shake your head and say, okay, well, that makes sense. We shouldn't be competing with these teams. So at least help me get over to the positive side a little bit.
I'm going to go back to Nick Lima. I think when you look at Berhalter coming in, one of the biggest winners throughout this entire span of time has been Nick Lima. I don't think, for the most part, a lot of guys have taken their chances the way they could have with this type of opportunity. To me, he creates a question mark in Berhalter's mind to say, I think Nick can fit in with this first team group. Maybe that allows you to play Tyler in a central role, give you a little bit more of that engine and ideas in a little bit in the middle of the pitch. So Nick Lima has been, I think, a big winner for me, someone who can feature once the first group is decided upon.
Dwayne Holmes, anybody want to go there? I mean, just break it in.
Just in terms of energy, he was an improvement the last two games. The knock on him is he doesn't provide end product, and we saw it in this game. He was in the box. He had a chance. He had a couple of chances to complete passes as well. He didn't do it. But at this point, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of end product just to make us tougher to play against in midfield. And then on the back line, Walker Zimmerman was a huge upgrade in the second half over any of the guys back there. He picked up an early yellow card from being pretty aggressive, but I was okay with that. You want to make the attackers feel you, and then he won every challenge he went in for in the second half. Like, I was keeping an eye on that. Walker Zimmerman, I think he's a starter on this team. He absolutely should be.
Mistakes?
I'm just going to add Jozy, too.
The Jozy's an obvious one.
When he came on, the game changed. And not only just to see him on the field, but to see him playing well, to see him look healthy and sprightly was the big takeaway.
Yeah, they need that. There are also mistakes that happened in this game that we've kind of seen repeatedly now. One was from Zach Steffen. Any concerns about his place in this lineup? I mean, I think he is the number one, but these aren't moments that you can afford in a competitive tournament structure.
Yeah, there's concerns. And it just goes back to my original point when it talks about movement. When he did this with the Columbus Crew, there was a second player in the pivot, right? It wasn't just Will Trapp, but where Weston McKennie was standing there, Artur would have dropped back. It was very systematic. It was very intentional about what they did because they could train 5 days a week. So it goes to this point, can you play out of the back? Well, yes, other teams around the world do it. Can you do it the way Greg Berhalter asks you to do when you don't train 5 days a week? So, yeah, Andrew, there's absolutely a concern. It just goes back to the original point. In the larger picture, is it all possible given the constraints that Berhalter has right now?
But in that situation, when the ball comes back to you from one side, he had Long spreading out to the other side. Usually he makes that right decision to find Long. If you miss that pass, it goes out of bounds. That's a safer option than going up the middle. The only reason you play up the middle is when they split wide and try and take away that outside pass. Then it comes up, bounces to your 6 and out to the outside back. That's your safety valve. Or you try and go one over the top a little bit longer, but wide. He made the wrong choice in that minute, but I think Greg's going to give him that type of latitude, the freedom. He's done it consistently with Columbus. They've gotten burned on it, but by and large, I think it's the right thing to do, and they've been able to find success. He has the ability to do it. He just made the wrong choice.
No matter what happens, Zach Steffen's playing every single game this Gold Cup, unless he gets injured, because he needs the caps to get his work permit to eventually move to England. Now, we know he's going to go on loan to Fortuna Dusseldorf this year, but regardless, and you don't need the work permit, you don't need the official caps to get a work permit to play in Germany, but regardless, I'm sure Manchester City want to get him eligible so that in 2020-21, they can either bring him in or loan him out somewhere in England. But if he's going to do that, he's going to have to play a lot better than he has been the last couple months.
2020, 2021, that's a long way away. This summer is all about the U.S. national team and the Gold Cup on Club and Country. In addition to Canada, Mexico, and all other 16 teams going for that championship, Club and Country pregame and postgame shows before and after every U.S. national team gold match. MLSsoccer.com, the MLS app, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube as well for those postgame shows. It started with the sour note against Venezuela, 3-0 losers, and you might predict that the social reaction was not positive. How has the U.S. national team regressed this much? Now, that's also speaking of a team that didn't make the World Cup. Is this a regression? What is this in your minds?
I think it's a lack of depth. I think the depth has been questioned right now, and when you start over from scratch with an entire new group, that's going to happen. You lose a lot of players going out, and it can't be replaced this quickly. What our high-end talent is missing right now, and I think the depth hasn't been able to step up in a lot of cases.
And to make that point, it's not just the 4 guys we've been talking about. It's DeAndre Yedlin and John Brooks as well. And it's also, if this was the year before the World Cup, Alejandro Bedoya and Dax McCarty and a few other proven veterans would be out there playing in this game for the U.S., and those guys wouldn't have lost this one 3-0.
And if it's a couple years later, maybe you have Tim Weah, maybe you have Josh Sargent, maybe you have some other players that are involved as well.
And we need it. We need this U20s group to really hit.
To add one more answer to that specific question, have we regressed? If you look at the player pool, it's unclear whether the player pool has gotten better or worse, right? If you would take a guy like Paul Arriola over an Eddie Lewis, who was here 10 years ago. But what's interesting about that is the player pool hasn't probably advanced, but the playing style has. Greg Berhalter had a prerogative, which I think was the right decision, to progress. And you already mentioned it, the way the team is trying to play, more possession, more attacking, more adventurous, but the players haven't necessarily improved with it. So I'm not sure that the player pool has regressed, but as the style has improved, they didn't have the players to match it, and that's where some of the gap comes in and results.
Christian Pulisic, as we see here, Jesus saying, where's the attacking threat? That's where you might expect it to be. He should be playing in one of those dual sort of 10 roles. There's been argument whether he's better out wide. What does he have to be in this team?
The best player. He has to be the best player. He has to be, what Landon Donovan was for the U.S. in the 2006 and 2010 World Cup qualifying cycles. This is his chance to show that he is that guy. Now, I think for this tournament, it's definitely going to be in the interior as one of those 10s. Long term, I hope he's out on the wing because I think he's more dynamic in that space. But that gets back to what Kalen said, our lack of depth. And oh God, please let some of these U20s come good, whether it's Pamacol, Ledesma, Mendez, Brendan Aronson, Frankie, there's a lot of them playing. A couple of them have to up their levels.
He's just got to be Christian Pulisic. He's already proven himself with the national team and in club across the world. So to me, even in the end of the qualifying when they failed, he was one of the guys that was a leader that was trying to push the game and fight, one of the few to do it. So I expect him to take a bigger role as far as a leader within the team through his play and hopefully a little bit more with his personality in the locker room.
Do we think there's something missing with the identity, not just tactically as we've discussed in the way that you play, but also emotionally on the leadership perspective? A game like this, 3-0, Weston McKennie's the first guy to put in a real strong challenge.
Yeah, say what it is, the team's soft. Right? How else can you put it? I think you can be not necessarily a hard team and still win games if you play a certain type of soccer, but just physically, this team is soft, and it not just in the way they play, but in the leadership as well. Who is the guy that when the team is soft, someone makes that tackle, they make the statement, they yell at the 4 guys around them. Maybe it's Michael Bradley, but after that, who else? And the fact that it's still Michael Bradley and nobody else has taken that mantle is probably another question.
Is it softness or is it uncertainty? on the part of
It
everyone.
goes hand in hand.
Does it?
And that's one of the things that, like, the U.S. have looked really uncertain for years and years and years now. And maybe that does come down to personnel, but I hope it has to change. It has to change with reps, and it has to change with Adams, McKennie, and then whether it's Zimmerman or Miazga in central defense. Those three guys in particular, they got to be it, because we can't, like, you don't win games if you're soft, if you're easy to play against through central midfield.
And I would even add, too, just to go on a larger scheme about this, but I think this is actually something we should be concerned about more generally. We talk about passing, we talk about trapping technique, but I do think there's a concern from the development system all the way up about the hardness in some of these players. And if you go and watch some of the youth games, and you watch youth national team games, they're glorified training games. And if you're a coach out there, if you're somebody who evaluates this stuff, there needs to be an extra level of edge put into these, because I think we are seeing, even if these players are more technical and more talented coming up through, there has been an element of that edge and that hardness that's been lost.
I didn't see it today, and I think that's a fair criticism from today's performance. But when you look throughout, Walker Zimmerman, Christian Roldan, Weston McKennie, Nick Lima was a high school football player.
No. It's Christian Roldan.
Christian Roldan gets stuck in.
Bro, we used to have Kyle Beckerman. We used, like, if you go back through the players that used to be in that midfield, like, they were.
Yeah, he doesn't have the size of those guys, but I think he's got the tenacity for sure. If you watch him play week in, week out with Seattle Sounders, he gets stuck in. He's a tough kid. I think all these guys have it in them. Now today, I think you can criticize them and say the performance wasn't there, the fight wasn't there, and that's where U.S. fans are going to be really disappointed. But as far as calling the group soft overall, I just can't quite take that step.
We'll see. This summer, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Panama. Those are the group stage opponents for the U.S. national team. Canada's another team we're going to cover on this show. They've got Mexico in their group. They're going to have to show that they're up to the task as well. And things are changing for the Canadians. There's a brotherhood going down up north.
The 14th minute, Canada leading by a goal to nil. Jonathan David has it. Through for David once again, and in towards Hollis. Gets in round the back as he pulls that one back. It's driven in. Nonchalant with the finish.
It's a very exciting time for Canada. So many quality players.
They have an extraordinary amount of talent in this squad. And there's number 5.
It's a win for John Herdman on his debut as head coach of our men's national team.
My first conversation with John was at least an hour and a half.
I had been away from the national team for a long time, and he wanted to understand why.
I remember speaking to one of the senior players. You know, he openly said we had a talented team that should be getting to the final of that tournament. But in the moment, that the team just didn't bond together.
I feel like there was a lot of single entities within the group.
So, you know, when you heard all of that, when you're starting to craft your culture, you know, these are the foundations.
The brotherhood is something he gave us to work towards.
We want to feel that, you know, this is a second family for everybody that comes in.
But what they've drilled into themselves now is at the end of the training, they finish in a very deliberate way.
After every session, everybody gets in together, they put their hands up, and they say brothers. And that is the term that matters most.
It's a code that we live by now. And every time we put on the jersey, we understand that.
The idea of brotherhood is we're all in this together. There's no me, you know, it's bigger than just us.
Which is almost a celebration of, one, the opportunity to be together in this shirt, but two, to say, look, whatever comes, we're going to be together here.
And to get to a brotherhood, it's about going through big moments.
Gold Cup coming around the corner, it's exciting times.
This opportunity that we have is big for all of us, because we all want to put Canada back on the map.
If this goes in the right direction, anything is possible.
Feet of David, Cavallini in the middle.
We're on a journey to somewhere that we all care deeply about.
Super exciting times to be a Canadian in football.
I spoke to Jonathan Osorio for our Canada preview, which you can catch on MLSsoccer.com this week. It's all about brotherhood. 19 years since they won the Gold Cup title. They're the only team outside the U.S. and Mexico to do so. We'll have pregame and postgame shows before and after every single U.S. national team Gold Cup match this summer. We'll also cover the Canadians, Mexicans, and everything else going on in the tournament. Kalen, what's this summer mean for Canada?
Well, it's a huge opportunity. We know they're going to be in 2026, but I sat down and talked with Jonathan Osorio when I was doing the movement episode here up in Brampton.
Brampton, represent, huh?
Yeah,
pride of, man.
And but he was talking about, we know we're going to be in 2026, but the goal is to qualify. Like, they want to say we qualified for 2022, and this Gold Cup is a huge opportunity for them to create a sense of belief. If they can make a deep run within the group, they have a nice combination between some experienced leadership as well as some talented young players, as we know, with Alphonso Davies, and some really star players, guys that are emerging like Mark Anthony Kaye, Jonathan Osorio in MLS. So they've got all the blend. I just think they need a little bit of belief, and this is what the Gold Cup opportunity is.
A little bit of belief and a little bit of defense. Their attack is fantastic. Even if they move Davies to left back, their attack is still fantastic. They have one of the best young players in the Belgian league, and Jonathan David. Cavallini, one of the better strikers, center forwards in Mexico. We know what Kyle Larin can do. You go on down the list, obviously Osorio and Simeon Jackson, Junior Hoylett rather, coming out of central midfield. So they have answers in attack. The question with this team is, can they defend at the level that they need to in order to compete at the highest level? Daniil Henry of the Whitecaps has to be massive over the next month for them.
Open question about defense for them as well for the U.S. after today's 3-0 loss. We're looking ahead. Wash your hands of it. Venezuela, that one's over. Here's what I think Greg Berhalter would go with if he had all of his players available. Ream, Long, Miazga, Adams, Stefan, Bradley. There's Adams in that sort of box coming up in possession and also defending, pushing forward. Boyd, Ariel out wide, Pulisic, McKinney, and Altidore. Is that about right? Is that where it stands for you guys? What are the strengths and weaknesses of this team?
The wingers look on the weaker side to me. Boyd only played 60 minutes, and immediately penciling him in as a starter. He had some nice service, but I'm not sure necessarily a stake claim to that spot there. So I see most of this looking like Greg could set it up, but I still have question marks as far as where is that attack and width coming down the wing.
Is that central defensive pairing what you guys would go with?
Aaron Long was miserable today. I do think that he ends up being a starter by the time this tournament is really kicked into gear. It's worth remembering that he's missed the past 6 weeks with an injury, was rusty and certainly looked like it. I think you should write Walker Zimmerman's name in pen at this point, because he was making plays that the other guys weren't. Matt Miazga, as much as I've liked this kid over the last few years, he's been lost for the U.S. the last few times he's played.
I don't want to talk about this one anymore.
Okay, well, we'll get to your lineups now then.
I want to get to our lineup. We've seen this lineup. What do we say? We've seen that lineup,
Let's take a look at mine.
Yeah.
Bobby, come on, give me a chance here. So I think the big surprise for people is maybe to see Nick Lima here on right back, but I think he's done enough throughout his time with the national team here to show that he can play that hybrid right back position. And I think about what that allows to happen in the middle of midfield, and that's the main reason why I think you feel comfortable making this switch, where you get Adams, McKinney, and Bradley in the middle three right there, and that allows Christian Pulisic then to play at his best position, which is on the wing, to be able to go one-on-one, get isolations out wide. Areola has been super dangerous, just missing that final product sometimes, but brings enough pace to be able to stretch things on the other side of Pulisic. So when I wrote it down, it was interesting to look at, because you think of what are the first names I write. And I wrote down Walker Zimmerman, Zach Steffen, of course, Michael Bradley, Jozy Altidore, Christian Pulisic, Tyler Adams. I mean, I felt pretty good about writing it down. The question marks came a little bit with seeing who are the wide guys going to be, and that's where I wanted to say, if you play Lima, which allows Adams in the middle, then Christian can play at the best position for him, which I still think is right wing, and that's a real priority for me getting forward.
Any thought to switching Pulisic and Areola in that setup? Because I just think about that right side, the uncertainty for Nick Lima, and the fact that you want Pulisic to have zero trepidation about going forward, pushing, being goal dangerous. Do you flip those guys? Give a little defensive help to Lima with Areola, who will be a little more dedicated to getting back?
Well, I think Christian's going to have a free role in that right-sided position. So if he wants to go on the left side, if he wants to tuck in underneath Jozy or get a little more connected to Jozy, the team would be able to create some type of relationships there, where Tyler Adams, also being close to him, can slide out wide and protect Christian a little bit on the defensive side of things. Nick Lima getting forward. If he wants to go attack, Tyler Adams is sort of the Swiss Army knife and can help in a lot of different situations. So that's how I would set this team up.
Yeah, you have to keep Pulisic on that side.
Yep.
because the whole reason you're playing Adams at right back is to be the one to create the overloads. He gets to pick where to go, central, to the right, overlap, underlap, and you're only doing that to have him in the optimal scenarios, which has to be on the same side as Pulisic.
Let's take a look at your 11 right now. What do you got for us?
All right, well, so you're going to see some names that look a little funny, and I acknowledge that. Weston McKennie at right back, Michael Bradley up a little higher. If this was ideal for me and John Anthony Brooks was available, I'd move Aaron Long to left back. And it goes back to the original point. When we look at McKennie at right back there, we're not talking about the traditional right back we see with a guy like DeAndre Yedlin and the way he plays it. This is somebody who is going to press farther up the field, get the ball in the middle of the field. Really the one player on this team who has the ability to make decisions in unbalanced teams, and McKennie's really good at that. Conversely, he's not great getting the ball with his back to goal in the middle of the field, which is what the attacking midfielders do, and that's why I have Michael Bradley, because we still don't have that player. And this is probably the second big conversation for me, not just whether you can conduct a process at the international level, but does the player pool fit what Greg Berhalter wants to do? Because the guy clearly has a system, he clearly has a plan, but do the players at his disposal, who are the attacking midfielders? Because it's not Pulisic, I don't think, for his skill set. Who's the right back? It does the player pool fit it, which is why we see so many names that might look a little out of position.
I actually like Bobby's lineup quite a bit right here, because it takes Bradley out of that spot where he has to make the defensive play. If you're the 6 in this lineup, you have to make those defensive plays, and Michael Bradley can't really do that at the level that he used to. But he's still smart enough and clever enough to find the game. As Bobby said, he's good with his back to goal, and he's always been really good at sort of vertical off the ball movement. Yep. Right? Yep. So like if you put Pulisic wide and Boyd on the other side, whoever's in those spots is going to get chances to come in late at the top of the box and finish. And he scored, 20 goals in the Netherlands doing that.
Yep. Weston McKennie as a right back.
But it's not a right back.
He's actually, to be fair.
He played, first of all, he played a lot of right back for Schalke this year. Both right center back in the 3 or right wing back when he played that position. But it's also not a right back. I mean, look at this game today. At its best, he's not playing the right back position. He's playing attacking mid. He's counter-pressing from a center midfield position. It fits his skill set.
He was one of the easy answers for me to slide in as those dual number 10s.
But when has he ever played well there? We keep on doing this with Weston McKennie. I think Weston McKennie is a very good player probably, but it's been a long, long time since he's played well in a game. If you watch Schalke this year, and part of it's because they just weren't a very good team and their coach didn't really have the right ideas, but it's been a long time since Weston McKennie has played well for either club or country. And I have no problem. I think he's probably the right guy for the team. I think he's a very good player. But we also have to say, you've got to play well at some point.
I thought he was one of the better players today on the pitch.
I mean 3-0 loss to Venezuela.
Yeah, but he was one of the bright spots. He had the one chance on the header on goal. You're now taking him as far away from goal as humanly possible.
But you're not. That's the point. But you're not. He's not playing right back. He's playing essentially attacking mid, creating overloads from that position. He is still playing farther up the field.
At some point, he's going to be asked to defend in that position too. Going against Alphonso Davies or any of the top wingers in CONCACAF, I just think it's overthinking. It's putting him a little bit out of position there. There's so many good options at right back, especially too when you look at the entire player pool from Tyler Adams to Nick Lima. That's not a weak spot or a problem area. Why create one there and use Weston in a position where he can really flourish?
Interesting questions here. What's your lineup look like? You like Bobby's? What do you got?
I like Bobby's. It was more creative than mine. I went with the 4-3-3 that's really more pressing than what we have seen from the U.S. under Greg Berhalter. Like, they haven't pressed as much as I thought I would. I would want both wingers to play higher. So that really is a true front line. And just try to play on the front foot. And to me, that Adams, McKennie, Holmes central midfield would chew up ground, would win the ball there, and would give Pulisic and Boyd a chance to get the ball in spots where they're going against a scrambling defense. They're not trying to break down banks of 4. They're not trying to pick a lock against a team that is in their block.
You're trying to marry Greg Berhalter and Jesse Marsch. That's what you're trying to do.
I might just be going pure Marsch with this because most of our best players are better playing against the ball than with it. They just are at this point. Jozy's probably the biggest exception. I think if Michael Bradley was in there, he would be the exception as well. But I think we should move this team towards the strengths of the younger generation. And it's like we got to win the ball higher and more often, and we have to transition faster.
Any team without Michael Bradley in the starting lineup for me is a non-starter. I think he's an easy answer to play that number 6 position. I noticed you guys both have Holmes in that, which is interesting to me from the start.
I don't feel
thought he was a
great
nice
about it.
player, but
Yeah.
I feel like maybe off the bench is a role that's a little better suited for him.
Does it concern you, talking about banks of 4? The group stage is likely to be a situation where there are a lot of banks of 4. The U.S. will be the favorite, the clear favorite, or should be, in theory, in all these games. Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, although last result not so great, and Panama. Does that change the way you think about it? Can you press teams that aren't going to let you press? Do they have to figure out how to break down that bank of 4? Isn't that the issue?
I mean, they do. And you have to be clever and you have to be disciplined. And when you have moments, you have to take it. And I think that's why Christian Pulisic is playing as the 10. Because the idea is going to be that Jozy checks back to the ball, brings the defense with him, and as that happens, off Pulisic goes into the space. Kind of like the goal that he scored against Chile, but smaller. You have to be able to do that via combination play and not necessarily via a long ball. It's not always easy.
We're going to get out of here right now, but I want one sentence from each of you. Expectations for the U.S. in this Gold Cup group stage, what are they?
I mean, there are some questions asked about them and whether they should still be the final, but I think the final is the mark of where they need to get to. Maybe if you lose in the final to Mexico, it'd be heartbreaking. But I think the final is the mark for me of where the expectation should be.
That's where it stands, the final?
The expectation should be winning it. Even if it should always be winning it, and I will never change that.
What they said. Win the damn thing.
All right, we shall see. Of course, we are covering every single U.S. national team Gold Cup match this summer, pregame and postgame shows here on Club and Country. We'll also be covering Canada, Mexico, the rest of the teams in this tournament. You can find those at MLSsoccer.com, the MLS app, Twitter, Facebook, and the postgame shows on YouTube. 3-0 losers today, the U.S. national team to Venezuela. Not the result they wanted. The Gold Cup is next, starting Tuesday, June 18th against Guyana. We're out of here. Enjoy your day, everybody.